Alright, so today I want to show you 38 ways that you can make an all-white ball python. As a matter of fact, over 20 years ago at the beginning of the ball python craze, the all-white ball python was kind of considered to be the holy grail of ball pythons. Everyone was rushing to try to produce the first one. As a matter of fact, the very first one sold for over $100,000. Pretty amazing. And now you can pick up all-white ball pythons for just a few $100s. And if you ask a lot of breeders will say, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to actually make an all-white ball python. And I actually sat down and figured it out and kind of scribbled down all the different ways that you can make a white ball python with all the different genes. And I came up with 38 different ways. Pretty amazing. I didn't even know there was that many ways you could actually make one until I sat down and calculated it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to jump over to the internet and I want to show you all the different ways that you can make an all-white ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with the Ivory ball python. The Ivory is actually a super yellow belly. And as a matter of fact, it's the very first all-white ball python that was ever produced. And I'm pretty sure the very first Ivory sold for $125,000. And if you actually take a look at the price on this one actually sold for $125. And that was 3 years ago. Pretty amazing how the price really changed from when they first came out until here. We're like 20 plus years later. Pretty amazing. And the kind of the disadvantage of making a white snake is a lot of times you can actually accidentally mix other genes into a white snake and it kind of masks the other genes that are in there. So sometimes you'll actually see an Ivory, possible pinstripe, possible GHI with all these other possible genes in there, and you actually make an all white snake and it completely masks most of the genes. In most cases you can hardly ever get a gene to actually break through most white snakes. Although with the Ivory, actually the leopard is pretty much the only thing that really breaks through. And if you actually mix leopard with other genes, sometimes you can bring the other genes with leopard to actually break through the Ivory. So kind of the next one I want to show you here, this is actually a Super Fire. A Super Fire is a black-eyed leucistic. You notice it has really jet black eyes, and a lot of Super Fires actually have little splotches of yellow through the snake. Sometimes it's a little difficult to actually find a completely white one. You can see there's just a little bit of yellow on this one. Sometimes they can have really intense patches of yellow. It actually has 2 copies of the co-dominant fire gene. As a matter of fact, this one actually has Pastel in it, and a lot of times, you know, sometimes this is actually, sometimes it'll say like a black-eyed leucistic plus a possible other gene. Sometimes you can pick up a really good deal because a lot of people don't know what's in there. Probably if they're listing Pastel, I'm guessing one of the parents was probably a Super Pastel, where you know 100% of the time you'll actually get Pastel in with your white snake. So this one is a Super Sulfur. Super Sulfur is really similar to the Super Fire. Some people consider the Sulfur a different line of fire, although it seemed like with the Sulfur you actually get a lot more yellow. I had a hard time actually finding a Super Sulfur that was almost completely white, almost the same as Fire. As a matter of fact, they're both allelic. So take a look at this. You can actually make this one. This is actually a Sulfur Fire. So it has 1 copy of each genes and it's allelic combination. It acts like a super, and I think that's why a lot of people consider it to be kind of the same gene. You can definitely see on this one you actually have quite a bit of yellow coming in through the snake. Sometimes it's really hard to get an all white snake with the Super Fire or the Super Sulfur or the Sulfur Fire. So here is kind of an interesting combo. So the next few snakes I want to show you is if you actually start with a Pied, which is a recessive mutation to work other genes in with the Pied, you can actually make an all-white snake using Pied. This one's actually a lesser Pied, and every single time you mix in lesser with Pied, you get an all-white snake. And as a matter of fact, I actually have a lesser Pied here in my collection. The interesting thing with the lesser Pied is the eyes are bright blue, but a lot of times they're actually slightly smaller than a normal ball python's eyes. It kind of has like micro eyes in the lesser Pied. It's kind of an interesting anomaly with this one, but it's a really beautiful solid white, almost a super bright white snake. Really awesome. So here's another one. This is actually a champagne pied, and I've actually seen champagne het pieds that look like a visual pied. It was just one copy of the pied gene. If you actually take two of those champagne het pieds, breed them together, you get a champagne pied, which has champagne and two copies of the recessive pied gene, and you end up with an all-white snake. And look at the eyes on this. They're a little slightly bigger. It's kind of interesting on a lot of these all-white snakes. Sometimes you can get the enlarged eyes, and sometimes you can get the smaller eyes. Sometimes they're really jet black, and sometimes they're really super bright blue eyes on a lot of the blue-eyed leucistics. It's kind of interesting. So here is a Mystic Potion pied. I kind of ran into this kind of browsing through the pied. As a matter of fact, it actually has Mojave and Mystic. So if you actually do a Mojave pied, it's not all white. And if you do a Mystic pied, it's not all white. It seems like the combination of the Mojave and the Mystic together actually produced this snake. And this one actually sold for $1,000. Some of these pieds are pretty expensive. It's kind of interesting. You can have two white snakes side by side and have a really huge difference in price depending on what genes are actually in the white snake. Here is the White Wedding. The White Wedding is a spider pied. The spider pied is kind of interesting because what the spider does is it pushes all the color, usually just to the head of the ball python. So you actually have a pied with just a little color on the head of the ball python. And then the White Wedding is actually a spider pied where you actually have an all white snake with no color at all on the whole snake. I'd say maybe in 10% of the cases when you have a spider pied, you actually get a White Wedding. So if you're actually trying to reproduce this, I'd say it's a little bit more difficult because you won't actually produce it 100% of the time. So here is a Panda Pied, and it's kind of interesting. If you actually seen the Panda Pied, you actually know that it has really jet black patches on the snake, almost like someone took a tattoo thing and actually tattooed like an ink jet black spot on the snake. Really awesome. And it seems like there's a high percentage of Panda Pieds that come out completely white, all white, with actually no color at all. And you're gonna kind of freak out on this price. This is probably the most expensive all white snake over here on Morphmarket. This one is actually $8,000 for an all-white Panda Pied. This one's also possible het candy, possible het albino. Looks like there was maybe a Candino in there somewhere in the mix actually breeding this pretty awesome snake. So here is a Pinto Pied. The Pinto Pine is actually the Russo mixed in with the Pied, and it's kind of interesting if you actually mix some of the blue-eyed leucistics in with the Pied. Sometimes you can get a snake with bright blue eyes, like the lesser Pied has bright blue eyes, and in this case it almost looks like it has really dark, almost black eyes. And the Pinto Pied is kind of one of those ones I'd say maybe 50% of the time there's actually some splotches of color on the snake, and it seems like a lot of times with the Pinto Pied there's a lot of color, just one little splotch right on the head of the Pinto Pine, but every now and then you'll actually get a completely white Pinto Pine. So here's another one. You might find this one interesting because I have a bamboo around my neck at the beginning and end of every video. This is actually the Bamboo Pied. And as a matter of fact, I was kind of disappointed that you actually mix bamboo in with the Pied and you get a completely white snake. And it kind of surprised me at first. And then after I started kind of wrapping my head around a lot of the blue-eyed leucistics, when you mix it in with Pied, you end up with an all-white snake, like the lesser is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And it kind of makes sense since the lesser Pied is an all-white snake, that the Bamboo Pied would also be an all-white snake. So I'm going to kind of switch from the Pieds. I want to show you some of the genes in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And this is a super bamboo. If you actually take two bamboos and breed them together, 25% of the time you get an all-white snake with blue eyes. And it's interesting on a lot of these blue-eyed leucistics, sometimes it has like a really dark blue, sometimes it has a bright blue, sometimes it has kind of like almost like a clown-looking eye. It's almost like it doesn't even look real. Some of the eyes that are just like so bright blue, like sky blue on some of these ball pythons. This one's kind of in the middle, and sometimes the color and the blue eyes doesn't go all through the eye complete from one side to the other. Sometimes the bottom's a little bit darker and the top of the eye is a little bit lighter. So here is the bamboo with the lesser. The lesser and the bamboo are both in the blue-eyed leucistic. And as a matter of fact, there's a lot of genes where in the blue-eyed leucistic, if you actually cross them together, you actually don't get an all-white snake. Like in the Phantom and the Mystic, a lot of times you actually don't get all-white snakes. But the lesser bamboo is a really beautiful snake. As a matter of fact, I actually produced a bamboo lesser. I have a male, and this is actually an allelic combination. So if you actually breed this to something else, half the offspring come out lesser, half the offspring come out as bamboo. Really powerful breeder. And in this case, it seems like you get really super bright blue eyes on this snake. It's pretty awesome. So here is the bamboo mocha. Mocha is also in the blue-eyed leucistic. You get an all-white snake with really bright blue eyes, and you can actually just keep working the bamboo into some of this. This is actually the bamboo lesser pastel possible fire. So if you actually take a look at this, this is the bamboo lesser with the pastel in it. And you can see this completely envelops the pastel. You really can't see the pastel in this combo. Here is the Bamboo Phantom. And when it comes to phantoms and mystics, you can actually see a little bit of bleed through kind of coming through the pattern where you don't get a completely white snake with a lot of the phantoms and the mystics. And this one I'd say is really close. You can actually, if you look really close, you can kind of see some of the pattern just kind of breaking through. And you get a little bit of gray on the tail and a little bit of gray on the head. You have a little bit of light yellow right down the top. As a matter of fact, my bamboo lesser has kind of like a light yellow stripe right down the top of the snake. So here is the bamboo Russo. Russo is actually considered, also named het leucistic, because it was one of the first all-white, kind of in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, the bamboo Russo. And then some people would actually call it, you know, bamboo het leucistic as far as that combo. It makes for a really super white snake. So here's another one. This is actually the Bamboo Special, and the Special is one of the ones kind of on the edge. They consider it to be in the blue-eyed leucistic, but you actually mix it with some combos, and you can actually see a little bit of pattern coming through. Sometimes you can actually make some really awesome combos with the Special. You can definitely see there's some pattern coming through, but I would say this is considered a blue-eyed leucistic. Has a little bit of yellow on the top, but it's pretty much as white as you can get with the Special and the Bamboo with the blue eyes. So here is a super lesser. So keep in mind the lesser is also in the blue-eyed leucistic. You breed two lessers together and you get the super lesser. And kind of one of the genetic anomalies with the super lesser is a lot of times they'll have kind of these bigger eyes. It's kind of a characteristic of the super lesser. And a lot of people say if you want the perfect blue-eyed leucistic, normally you'd take lesser and you'd breed it to something else. And most people would say actually the lesser Mojave is kind of the ultimate blue-eyed leucistic with the normal looking eyes. So what you can actually do is you could take a super lesser, breed it to a super Mojave, and you get a whole clutch of lesser Mojaves, which would be like the ideal blue-eyed leucistic. So here is the lesser mocha. You can kind of see a pattern here. You actually just keep combining all the different genes in the blue-eyed leucistic and you get white snakes with blue eyes. And look at the eyes on this one, super like a crystal blue. That looks really awesome. Here's another one. This is the Mojave lesser. You get the bright blue eyes and an all-white snake. There's so many ways you can make it. This is the Karma, and the Karma is actually a phantom lesser. As a matter of fact, there's a few snakes over here that I can only find one or two over here on Morphmarket. Some of these genes are kind of rare. I think this one there's quite a few, but some of them were kind of hard to track down. You definitely see on this one all white and with the bright blue eyes on this one. Here's another one. This is the lesser Russo, another all-white snake with blue eyes, and you can just kind of keep mixing up all these different. This is actually a special lesser GHI, and you can actually definitely see in here, you definitely can't see the GHI at all. The GHI is usually really visually dominant, and it's a dark morph, and even being a dark morph and still visually dominant, the white snake completely overtakes the GHI, and you can't see it in there at all. This is a really awesome looking snake. Here is a super mocha. Not many people are actually working with the mocha. Not many mochas over on Morphmarket. And this is actually another really awesome all-white snake in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. Here is the Mojave mocha. And sometimes in a lot of these combos, you'll actually see more or less yellow. Sometimes it comes down the very top of the snake. And in this case, it actually comes down the side of the snake. And if you just keep going down, this is actually the Mocha Phantom. So keep in mind the Phantom is actually right on the edge of producing all white snakes in a lot of cases. Sometimes you mix it with different genes in the blue-eyed leucistic and you don't always get a white snake. And you can actually see some of the pattern coming through on this. It definitely has the blue eyes and it's considered to be a blue-eyed leucistic snake. Here is the Mocha Russo. If you're actually kind of wondering at the price of these, I'd say normally, like this one's about $300, I'd say almost all the time, pretty much since I started in ball pythons, the prices have been really solid for blue-eyed leucistics, right around $300. And the problem is you kind of start seeing a pattern here. A lot of people say, hey, I've just bought this blue-eyed leucistic. What can I breed it to actually make some more white snakes, or what would be really good to breed it to? And it really depends on the genes in the snake. So, you know, kind of looking back at all these different white snakes in the blue-eyed leucistic, it could be a little confusing because if you actually breed it to something else and you don't know what the genes are, for example, not many people would probably guess that you would have Mocha and Russo in your blue-eyed leucistic. You would start breeding it to other things and you may get unexpected results thinking it might be lesser or bamboo or something like that. And a lot of times the prices actually depend on the genes in the snake. So for example, when I make a blue-eyed leucistic with bamboo, it usually increases the price because people are looking kind of more for the higher end bamboo stuff. So this is the Super Mojave, another really awesome all-white snake with super bright blue eyes. And this would be perfect to actually breed to the Super Lesser and you get the ultimate snake. Sometimes the Super Mojave, it kind of has kind of a grayed out head in a lot of cases, and sometimes it's not really super pure white. And they say, you know, if you actually take the Mojave, breed it to a Lesser, you get a really super white snake with really bright blue eyes with the perfect size of eyes, which is a lot of people look for the size of the eyes. Some people really don't care on the eye size. And look at the eyes on this one. This is actually a Rousseau Mojave. Look at how bright the eyes are on this one. Almost looks comical. It is amazing. Rousseau Mojave. And we can just keep going here. This is actually what called the opal diamond, kind of the slang for this combo. This is the Phantom Russo. And you can definitely see there's a lot of pattern coming out of this blue-eyed leucistic, and that is from the Phantom. Usually the Phantom, when you mix it in with other genes, it tends to kind of bleed some of the pattern through, and a lot of times you actually get some of this kind of the color coming in through the head on some of these Phantom combos. This is actually called the Diamond. The Diamond is actually a special and a Russo, both in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And you can see on this one, you have a line down the top and bright blue eyes. And there's quite a few ways you can actually, as a matter of fact, this is actually a bamboo butter. And the butter is considered to be a different line of lesser. So a lot of people consider butter and lesser to be the same thing. Although there's a lot of diehard folks that actually split butter and lesser and keep them completely separate, and they say, and a lot of times, you know, the butter may be a little bit brighter than a lot of lines of lesser, and I actually have some lesser lines that are really super bright. This is actually the bamboo with the butter. This is the butter with the lesser. So you can see on this one, this is essentially the same thing as a super lesser or a super butter. And a lot of people consider them the same. And then some people in this case actually split them to where this is a butter lesser. And really, a lot of people, you know, they say they're kind of act the same in combos. But a lot of people, when they're talking about like the butter and the lesser, it's kind of similar to like the coral glow and the banana. They kind of trace the lineage of the original snakes back to different directions, and sometimes they can actually make kind of the same kind of combos, but a lot of people will separate them. Here is the Mojave Butter. You can definitely see it's kind of interesting on this one because this is a Mojave Butter, which would be, you know, if you actually think butter and lesser are the same thing, this would be equivalent to a butter Mojave Lesser. And they say the Mojave Lessers actually have perfect eye sizes. In this case, it looks like the eyes are maybe a little bit bigger than Mojave Lessers. So it's interesting that in this case, it almost looks like butter could be a little bit different than the lesser, which is interesting. So this one is the Mocha Butter. As a matter of fact, this is the only one over here that I could find, the Mocha Butter, an all white snake. And they actually have a statement here that the eyes are actually a dark blue on this one. Sometimes they're really super dark and sometimes they're really super light. It's kind of interesting. This one is called the Carmen. It's kind of interesting. We have all these slangs for a lot of the blue-eyed leucistics, the karmas and the diamonds, and this is actually a phantom and a butter. And it has a really neat yellow stripe right down the eye. I think this is pretty cool. And look at the eyes on this one. Really crazy, just really popping out. Really super bright blue eyes. And you can see on this one, about $350. That's kind of the average, about $300 to $400 for a blue-eyed leucistic. And I actually pulled another one up over here. This is actually on World of Ball Pythons. I was actually looking for a butter special over here on Morphmarket, and I couldn't find one at all. Apparently no one's ever produced one and posted one over on Morphmarket, so I actually had to come over here. I knew both of these were in the blue-eyed leucistic, so I knew it was possible to get an all-white snake with this combination. And you can definitely see that the special is kind of one of those ones that are on the kind of on the edge of producing a completely solid white snake. And actually allows a little of the pattern, you can see a little of the pattern bleeding through just a little bit of the snake because of the special. So I actually wanted to throw in this snake right here. This is actually number 39. As a matter of fact, I started the video and I said, hey, there's 38 combinations, and I got, you know, almost halfway through the presentation, and then I realized, hey, there is actually one more white snake that I forgot. As a matter of fact, there's probably more white snakes out there that you can make besides these 39 combinations. This is actually a VPI Snow, which is actually, it's an axanthic with an albino, kind of an unusual combo. I started talking about the eyes when I first started this presentation. I was like, hey, you know, you can actually have blue eyes, you can have black eyes. And then I started thinking, hey, you can actually make a white snake with red eyes with the VPI Snow. And it's not a completely white snake. In all cases, you can see a little bit of the albino kind of breaking through, but you can definitely see it's mostly white, and I would consider it to be an all white snake. Alright, so I wanted to give you kind of a cheat sheet right here at the end. This is actually all the combos that I just covered. I just kind of wanted to throw this up at the end so you can actually kind of get an overview of all the different combos. And I don't think I repeated any of these. These are all completely different combinations. And you can actually go through this and kind of check my work to see if you can actually, I don't think I have any duplicates in here. And if you actually have any to add to this, make sure you put it down in the comment section. I'm sure I probably forgot at least one white snake. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Chris Smith asks, when I'm feeding my ball pythons, is it better to feed in the dark or should I keep the lights on? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, when I'm feeding my snakes, it seems like I have more snakes that'll actually take a rodent if I'm actually feeding in dim light versus really bright light. I find if I actually take the studio light and put it right in the tub, sometimes they can be extremely bashful. As a matter of fact, if I have a really picky eater, sometimes what I can do is I can take like a frozen thawed rodent and kind of put it in the tub and close the tub almost all the way, hold it by the tail, and sometimes if I kind of just jiggle it in the tub a little bit and keep the snake almost all the way in the dark, sometimes even the pickiest eaters will actually take the rodent. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.